Good morning. This is Mr. Esmond and my grandson Blake, who's not feeling well today and isn't here. In order to help you write your paper on the nature, origin, and evil according to Tolkien, I thought it was necessary to bring to your attention certain passages from Silmarillion. By focusing on these passages, you'll be able to see the nature of Tolkien's view, so that you can write a better paper from it. The first passage that I want to bring to your attention is the one in the beginning of the Silmarillion, about the creation of the world. As you know, the Silmarillion begins with talking about Eru, the One, who's called Uluvatar in Arda. Arda is the Tolkien name for Earth. Uluvatar creates the Ainur, or the Holy Ones, which we would call angels or archangels and other angelic beings. Uluvatar creates the earth, the world, through song. But instead of creating a song with all the melodies and harmonies and everything worked out, and then letting the Ainur listen to it and applaud and say, "Oh, what a great job you did," Uluvatar creates the theme, the basic melody line, and then calls upon the Ainur to improvise and harmonize with it. But this goes along with Tolkien's view of the sub-creator that you read about in his essay on fairy stories. The sub-creator is what man's job is. God is the creator, and we are to be sub-creators. We work within the confines, within the creation that God has made. Oh, you're getting in my way, boy. The problem arises when man seeks to be the creator and step out of the role of sub-creator and go beyond the limits and boundaries that God has set. And that's what we find in the story of Melkor, who is one of the Ainur that was created by Uluvatar. It's in Melkor we see the seeds of evil being sown and then come to fruition. So what does Tolkien say about Melkor? Well, as you know, the Ainur improvise and sing their song and harmonize with the theme that Uluvatar has written. On page 16 of my book it says, "But now Uluvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Uluvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame, for the desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own. And it seemed to him that Uluvatar took no thought of the void, and he was impatient with its emptiness, he being Melkor. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Uluvatar, but being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren." So we see here the source of evil, the origin of evil. Melkor became impatient. He saw the void that was not being filled, and he thought that Uluvatar took no thought of it. He ignored it. And what was happening was he became impatient. Now this, we said, was similar to the outworking of Adam and Eve. Satan tempted them to eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that was basically an impatience on their part. God had a process that they needed to go through to mature in order for them to become the viceroys and the rulers of the earth, to have the wisdom, the knowledge of good and evil in order to rule properly. And they were to grow into that. But they decided to take a shortcut and eat the fruit of the tree early and become like gods. And that's where the fall came from. Impatience is Melkor's problem also. And so what he does is he goes, seeks the imperishable flame, which is the source or the life force that Uluvatar uses to create them. He thinks that it's somewhere out there, and he just needs to get it. But actually it's with Uluvatar. And therefore the problem is Melkor does not pursue Uluvatar, pursues something apart from him. And that is a very Christian idea, a very Augustinian, about the nature of evil. We are called to seek God. We are called to enter into relationship with God. God has created us for himself, and our hearts are restless until they find our rest in him, as Augustine said. What men do, what we all do, is we pursue good things things that are really not bad, but we pursue them apart from God. And by pursuing them apart from God, they turn us to evil. And that's what happens to Melkor. Melkor is alone in the void, and he begins to have his own thoughts that are in discord with his brethren. Aloneness is a big theme in the Silmarillion. Raise this up just a tad. In the Silmarillion. Being alone, you'll notice that certain characters are alone, and that's when bad things begin to happen. Feanor, but Turin Turambar is a classic example. Being alone breeds discord. Discord comes because you are no longer satisfied with the limits that God has placed in your life. You're no longer satisfied with the part that you have. You're no longer satisfied with the theme that God has given. You want your own thing. You want to do your own thing. You want to do what you want to do in order, as Melkor, to increase the power and glory of your own part. That's where sin and evil come from. Desiring that which God has not ordained. Stepping outside the limits. Limits is something that we will discuss when we get to Space Church also. So what's the result of this? The result is that Melkor becomes corrupt. After the world is created, the Ainur go down and they begin to work on Earth to create it and get it ready for the children of Uluvatar, which are the elves and the men. Melkor wants the kingdom for himself. He says on page 21, "This shall be my own kingdom, and I name it unto myself." Manwë opposes him, and there's a war with Melkor. Meanwhile, the Ainur try to make the world better. And what happens, though? This is what happens. It is told among the Eldar, that's the elves, that the Valar endeavored ever, in despite of Melkor, to rule the earth and to prepare for the coming of the firstborn, that's the elves. And they built lands, and Melkor destroyed them. Valleys they delved, and Melkor raised them. Mountains they carved, and Melkor threw them down. Seas they hollowed, and Melkor spilled them. And naught might have peace or come to lasting growth, for as surely as the Valar began a labor, so would Melkor undo it or corrupt it. And yet their labor was not all in vain, and though nowhere in no work was their will and their purpose wholly fulfilled, and all things were in hue and shape other than the Valar had at first intended, slowly, nonetheless, the earth was fashioned and made firm, and thus the habitation of the children of Uluvatar established at last in the deeps of time and amidst the innumerable stars. So Melkor, when the Ainur begin to create and prepare the world for the coming of the firstborn, the elves and the men, not the firstborn of the elves, excuse me, the children of Uluvatar, Melkor throws down and destroys everything they did. They raise up mountains, he tears them down. They build a valley, he fills it up. This is the problem. This is what happens with evil. Evil, in seeking to become a creator, loses its ability to even be a sub-creator. So instead of doing positive things, all evil can do is corrupt and undo, destroy, destroy, destroy. That is what evil does. And this goes along with the Augustinian and the Thomistic notion about the nature of evil. According to Augustine, evil is not something that is. Evil is a negation. It is taking something that's good, like, and turning it into nothingness. Nothingness is evil. To be nothing is evil. So it's not, evil is where good is removed, is lesser. And the less you move, the less good there is, the more evil it is until you get to nothing. So evil is not a positive thing. Evil is a negative thing. Now there's one passage in Tolkien that kind of contradicts it, which is something Tolkien scholars work with. But anyway, that's the nature of evil. And so we get to another part, and the Valaquinta, which is the later part, I'm talking about Melkor, of the enemies. It's on page 31 in my book. For he coveted Arva, to speak of Melkor, and all that was in it, desiring the kingship of Manwë and the dominion over the realms of his peers. From splendor he fell through arrogance to contempt for all things save himself, a spirit wasteful and pitiless. Understanding he turned to subtlety, and perverting into his own will all that he would use, until he became a liar without shame. Falsehood is truth corrupted. Truth, it is words that are devoid less of truth. That becomes falsehood. He began with a desire of light, But when he could not possess it for himself alone, he descended through fire and wrath into the great burning, down into the darkness. In darkness he used most in his evil work upon Arda, and filled it with fear for all the living. That's in the Vala Quinta. Another passage in the Vala Quinta, on page 27. Whereas Melkor spent his spirit in envy and hate, until at last he could make nothing, save in mockery of the thought of others, and all their works he destroyed, if he could. Evil becomes a negation, becomes a negative, a decrease, a withering, a nothing. That is the nature of evil. Now it's very important, though, to go back to the Ainu Lindale to understand another thing about evil. After the battle of the melodies and the themes, and Uluvatar's conquest of the themes and discord of Melkor, he says, this is on page 17, then Uluvatar spoke and said, mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor, but that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Uluvatar. Those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. So he says, in spite of all the wickedness and evil and the discord, I'm still going to let these melodies come to being. I'm still going to let them produce the world. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined. So in the end, what Uluvatar says to Melkor, Melkor, you can make all the discord you like. You can make all the contrary themes you like. You can do all these things. But in the end, all of these things have their origin in me. I am the source. There's no independent source out there. There's no point of reference apart from me, Uluvatar says. And more than that, your attempts at discord and overturning and being a creator and corruption, and I'm going to weave all of that into the theme that I am writing for the world, the story. It will play a part in that story. So in the end, though evil does evil things, in the end, God is able to move it and weave it and incorporate it into our lives. So that in the end, for the children of God, for the children of Uluvatar, they can say, it is good. God is good. And the world is good. That's what you need to think about when you write your paper.